We are live. Good evening, everyone. I'm David Johnson from Transform Ed Consulting. And a shout out to my dear colleague, Cassandra Williams, who is the brains behind Educational Innovations 360 Degrees. Our guest tonight is Dr. Andres Fortino. Andres Fortino, PhD, is a well-known education executive and leader, an educator, and a trainer. He is an award-winning educational researcher, recently receiving awards for the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers and the Academy of Management for his research on evidence-based education. He specializes in creating, designing, and implementing new educational and training programs and services. Dr. Fortino has an appointment as clinical associate professor at the New York University School of Professional Studies. He has worked in higher education for over 40 years. His other recent appointments include college provost and dean of academic affairs, DeVry College of New York, associate provost, NYU Tandon School of Engineering, dean of the School of Management, Marist College, where he created many educational programs, and associate dean and MBA program director, School of Management, George Mason University. Welcome, Andres.
Thank you, David. Glad to be here.
My goodness, sir, you have done a lot of things. How did you get here?
Well, my vocation and avocation was to be an engineer. And as an engineer, the world looks like a problem to be solved. So I love problem solving. I'm a problem solver. But I love education. I love teaching throughout my whole life, even though I spent time in some engineering companies, IBM. I did some research there. I got some patents. I had a really great opportunity to practice engineering, which is where I got my PhD in that field. I always wanted to get back to the academic world of teaching and helping students make their way in the world, in life. And so early in my career, I was an educator. I spent time, again, in the industry for a while, and then did some training with some very great companies, Learning Tree International, American Management Association. I still train with them. But eventually, I got back into the academic world. So the last 20 years or so, very intensive in the higher education, mostly at the graduate level. And as you saw, administration for a while. But now I'm back to being a faculty member. I step back up into the faculty. Most people say when you finish being a dean, you step down in the faculty. No. I've heard that expression about stepping back up into the faculty. And I'm very pleased that I have some great students and I love teaching. So I'm back to teaching.
That's where the real work happens.
That's where the real work happens. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I'm smart enough to know that there are a number of fields within engineering. What is your particular field?
It's great. So, good. Excellent. I had, in a sense, a double field. I didn't realize it then, but I did. I did a lot of work making chips, the chip making side of things, silicon and devices and things like that, which is where I did a lot of research with IBM. But I also did a lot of computer-based mathematical modeling of the chip making as well. So I developed that side of things. Now they call it machine learning and artificial intelligence. Then we call it numerical methods. So it was fun to do both. But along the way, I became a data communications expert in networks because I took lots of those courses as a graduate student. So I have a varied background in basically three fields. I've written a bunch of books. I'm on my 8th book right now. So very practical books, nothing very heavy. It's books to help students to learn.
Would you say that your background in engineering, and I would say electrical engineering, would that have led you to the title of our conversation today? The metaverse will change everything.
You bet.
Well, explain how that's led you to the metaverse.
Well, it's, to me, it's a natural extension of what we've been doing for the last 20 years, getting very involved in the internet and using the internet as a platform to deliver, to do our work as educators, to reach our students, right? So this is just in a way, it's an extension of this social fabric, social networks, socialization of the use of technology platforms. So it's the next evolution. It shouldn't be seen as something so radically different. It's just the next step. And it has some features and some good things as technology evolves into giving us those platforms. But it's just an extension of what we've been doing. I don't see it as anything.
And you mentioned that you're working on your 8th book.
Yeah.
What's the title of this, and what's the area of this book?
Data mining for business decision making. I teach in my classes, and I put together. It's more of a case study and case studies and a lab book to do exercises on practicing the techniques of data mining. So it's a practical book that I will use in my classes when I teach that topic.
Andres, I think you just opened a can of worms. So data mining, what would be the sources of the data in the cases that you're
great
presenting?
Mostly deal with business data to help businesses improve their money making situation, or organizations improve their processes to become better using data. So, and answering questions, but not the normal run-of-the-mill questions about the state of the business, but also predicting what's going to happen next. So help the business get real insights into how to improve what they're doing, and then looking forward to what's going to happen next to them. So that's the power of this data mining, is to give us insights into the future, predictive analytics.
Well, Andres, it seems we have firmly established that you are a guy who can talk about the metaverse, but you and I also have a personal connection. Tell our audience what that personal connection might be.
Well, we grew up in New York City, my friend, right? We went to school there. I'm a Stuyvesant graduate. I'm a City College graduate. Very steeped in New York City. I love the city and what it does for people. I came there as an immigrant, and we both grew up in East Harlem, So
that's right. Yeah. My part of East Harlem was called Spanish Harlem.
Yeah, Spanish. Me too. 106th Street, 2nd Avenue,
that's
3rd
right.
Avenue.
You're on 106th Street and 3rd Avenue. I was on 115th Street and Lexington Avenue. So you go west 1 block and then up 9 blocks, and you're at my house.
There was a library around the corner, and there's a big steep
on 110th Street. That's right.
Yeah, we can talk about that all along.
Across the street from the post office. Yes, and my junior high school was 109th Street? Right. Yes, 109th Street and 3rd Avenue. Right. Yeah, so we have a connection. We have a strong connection. Sir, we've established your credibility, and we've established the relationship that you and I have. Our topic for today is education. The metaverse will change everything, and we have 5 bullets to discuss. Where would you like to start?
Well, most folks wonder, what is this metaverse thing, right? And so they think, it's Facebook and Zuckerberg and Meta, and they're moving in a direction. And what is this thing? Is it real, or is it what? So it's coming on very strong right now, kind of like what it was 30 years ago with the internet. You wonder what's going to happen with the internet. What is this internet thing? And we were teaching in a normal classroom, and the internet started coming on very strongly. Eventually, social networks, and the kids were texting each other, and it got away from us in a way, right? So it's going to happen similar to that in a different direction. So the metaverse, it's got various aspects as they're developing now, very, very young, very, very at the very beginning, but it's got the virtual presence, which is kind of like what we do with Zoom and the internet, but double down on that. It's got a repository for data in a much more serious way, much more robust, much more involved, which we call digital twins. And it's got new ways of paying for things and funding things and doing commerce, and authenticating people. This thing, blockchains, amazing technology, and this thing called the NFTs, the ways of monetizing things, songs, artwork, but eventually the things we do, maybe education. That's going to be very interesting. And Web3 being the electronic commerce version of the metaverse as it is today, we don't think anything of buying things on the internet, right? The web. We'll go to Amazon, order the thing, and it's there the next day. Well, the Web3 will be that kind of thing, but on steroids, right? So those are the kinds of elements.
Let me jump in here, if I may. Um, like you said, when people hear metaverse, they think of Google or Facebook and Zuckerberg. By definition, what is metaverse?
Well, in a way, it's the technology. One of it is the technology of being able to interact with each other in a new way, right? With a three-dimensional rather than two-dimensional interactivity, where you put on these special devices. Today, we started this way. In the future, we may not need these, and then you actually feel immersed in a new environment, right? Which is different than being in person and different than interacting through what we're doing now, which is 2D, right? Zoom, that kind of technology. There'll be technology of that nature. That's one. So that's at the lower level. Then also interacting with each other, social networks at the next level, right? Much more real feeling interactivity rather than just communicating through a video link, right? So you feel like the other person is there. It's going to start to feel more like it's real, much more real, even though it's not real life. And
so then how will that change education?
Well, you think about it. How did the internet change how we taught? It enhanced what we did. It gave us new capabilities, and it took us in directions in which we took advantage of the technology while curbing its potential excesses. The same thing with the metaverse. These new technologies that are coming out are going to give us capability that we currently don't have. I could hold a class, and it will feel like I'm in the classroom with my students. In other words, it will be very much like, even though they're not there and I can't physically touch them, but they will look very much like them in the classroom, interacting with me. I'll see the facial expression. They'll see mine. It won't be through what currently is a little avatar. That's kind of hokey. It looks like gaming.
I have a book behind me that I used in a course for educational psychology. And one of the standouts from that book is that every time a new technology came along, whether it was the phonograph, whether it was the video, all the predictions were that it will revolutionize education. When television came out, they thought that it would make people smarter because they'd be watching PBS, and turns out that we're watching Seinfeld. So what would be the benefits and what might be the deficits of the metaverse as you envision it?
Sure. So some of the benefits are what we currently see as the benefits of teaching at a distance, virtual, which we do with Zoom. And it gets very old, and like I taught for 6 hours this morning, and you wondered how, this today online with Zoom, how could you do that for 6 hours? Well, it will feel more like being physically there, and it'll be more comfortable and less tiresome than being on video for 6 hours. So that would be kind of where we're headed, to be more emulating of real life, so it'll be more comfortable. And you'll have the additional. Right now, if you teach online, you don't have the physical presence to really capture the students' expressions as well as you do in the classroom, their mannerisms, whether they're engaged or not. You'll be able to experience that. So we will get back the experience of being face-to-face more than we are on Zoom, for example.
Well, what about the disadvantages or the deficits? And for example, as you and I were chatting before we went live, some people will argue that students are losing their ability to have face-to-face conversations, to be socialized into a regular society. So is that a deficit? Do we lose that ability with the metaverse or with these new technologies?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we move, with the new technologies, like using our phone, social media, social networks, we can decry the fact that the students are very engaged in that, and they don't interact with each other physically. They're not out there playing games in the street. They're texting each other, and they're going games with each other. But there is a shift that has happened. we could argue whether that's good or bad, but it has happened, and we can take advantage of that and use it to enhance our teaching, for example. Mm-hmm. So we could debate whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that shift that has happened. With the metaverse, it will happen even more. There will be other methods and modes of interacting that are taking us further away from being in real life, physically interacting with each other. But, you know, if there were pandemics, we are comfortable continuing on with our lives, learning, teaching our students, even though something bad is happening outside, and it won't be as big a shock as it was, for example. So that may naturally be taken care of and not disturb the student as much. I know my grandchildren had problems switching from being in the physical classroom with their physical teachers and their friends to now learning with a tablet in my living room, right? When they were here in the pandemic, right? Well, with that environment, they might be more comfortable, even though they're doing it at a distance. Okay. We can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it has advantages that could. And we're focusing a lot on the virtual presence aspect of the metaverse, but there's a lot of other parts of the metaverse that will come along, just like there was with the internet. It's not only teaching Zoom, but all of the registration for courses online, all of the internet helped us move forward with our choosing courses and looking for work and things of that nature, which we didn't have before, right? So it enhanced our ability to move on with our careers. So I think we'll see the same thing happening with the next step in that technology, which is will be the metaverse which will bring us.
Well, let's pick one of your other bullets here.
Okay, let's talk about blockchain. Blockchain is very interesting because blockchain is that ability now to authenticate events and situations and activities that we didn't have before. So we will have a much more of an opportunity to have our transcripts, our credentials to be authenticated and be able to present to a school or present to an employer, and for them to be more assured that it's really us, right? So blockchain gives us that ability for authentication. That right now you have to go to the registrar and have them send a transcript. It's very difficult and onerous to present credentials, and you could send an employer a copy from your files, but how are they assured they want the real thing? And it's a big transaction right now. So carrying these things with us that have the authentication of registration in using blockchain on these servers, then the transparency of that, there's security involved that you won't let anybody have these things unless you authorize it. But the recipient will have the security or the assurance that
you are who you say
you are, who you are, and your transcript and your credentials are what they are because they've been registered. It's transparent from that point of view once they get to see it. So it really enhances that part of it. As an example,
now is that a part of the metaverse that you envision?
Yes, exactly. It is one of those technologies of the metaverse. It's one of those technologies. Okay. It's like saying with the internet, we buy things on Amazon. That's one technology, right? We interact on social networks. That's another technology, and we do Zoom to learn on another technology. So the internet right now gives us a lot of technologies that we call the internet, right? Well, metaverse will be that kind of environment with new technologies, with new capabilities, and new opportunities for us to apply to education, right?
And where does virtual presence fit into this? Two places at the same time, simultaneously.
Well, we're doing this right now, right? At home, you're at home, and we're in two places at once, and we're seeing each other, and we're interacting on this virtual environment where other people are seeing us. So we could be.
So are you saying that with the metaverse, because it is 3D, that there'll be the actual feeling that the person is there in front of you when the person could indeed be on the other side of the world?
Real life, yes. Right. And a lot of science fiction that we see today that gives us that experience is going to actually come about because science fiction often precedes, and often inventors use use the science fiction things that writers write of science fiction as maybe we will make that come about. It's a cool thing, and they actually make it happen. A lot of the things that are
Alexa was Star Trek's computer.
Yeah, exactly. All of that stuff, they invented it on science fiction, and then the inventors made it come about. So,
So virtual presence, as I'm thinking about metaverse and virtual, seems like metaverse is a step above or beyond virtual. For example, you and I are in a virtual conversation right now, a virtual relationship. But and as you pointed out, it's a two-dimensional relationship right now, a two-dimensional presence. But as you describe metaverse, it's three-dimensional. So would I be correct in saying that it's a step above a virtual presence?
Yeah, well, it's virtual in that you're not there physically, right? So whether it's 2D or 3D, it's still virtual, but a much more realistic version of virtual, right? Okay. So you call it virtual because you're not there physically, but it is a much more enhanced virtual. There's a great story, if I may, that a science fiction writer that I admire, Isaac Asimov. He wrote I, Robot and a lot of very futuristic worlds that have robots in it. In one of those, there is a real life detective, and he's got a robot sidekick to help solve crimes. And in one of the stories, they travel to this world that has humans in it. The humans have colonized it, but there are very few humans there, 50,000. They're spread out all over the world, and they own big estates. Each human has like 10,000 robots to work the estate, right? So, we don't want to go there because it speaks of other times in our country, but still, the robots are the machines that help them carry on. And the humans have gone to the place where they don't like to see each other physically. They don't like to touch each other physically. It's a whole culture of anti-physical. So, but they interact with each other, and they do it through these very elaborate spaces where they come into a room and the other person's in a room, and all of a sudden the two rooms, they virtually connect to where you feel like you're there, right? Across the table. And you can't touch them, but it feels like you're in the same room with them. It's so real. And Asimov describes it in a really, really good way, as a science fiction writer could do it. So one day we'll be there. We'll be there.
Okay. All right. We have like 7 minutes remaining.
Right.
So hop onto one of these bullets and let's give people a benefit of your knowledge.
So you want me to jump on another one?
Sure.
Okay, great. Web3 and the NFTs. Web3 and the NFTs is a whole new way of monetizing artwork and art. An artist creates a song, and instead of selling copies of the song by people playing it or buying it on a CD, the normal ways in which music is distributed, they will actually sell people a little piece of their song, as if their song was a company that you sell shares of. The NFTs, non-fungible tokens, are shares on this song that you now own, right? And so you have rights that come with that ownership. And the artists will fund their artwork by selling shares of their song as they're creating, or a picture. And some of those pictures are digital pictures, some are physical pictures. And you own a piece of this artwork as an investor in the artwork through this NFT. Now, this could also, in the future, people could invest in their education that way. They could pay a university through NFT. So there's a whole new way of economically interacting with each other to pay for things, invest in things. And with that investment comes rights that come to you, right? That privileges. And so it'll be...
I'm going to interrupt you if I may. It might be useful to describe or define what NFTs are and how people use them. For example, there's still a lot of controversy and perhaps even some unease about how NFTs work.
Sure. And the reason that the NFTs are, there's unease about it, because if you have a piece of artwork, right now they're mostly digital. Some artist creates a piece of art digitally, or creates a song and records it digitally. That digital creation exists in the digital space. There's no physical presence to that, right? But now they can sell shares of that. That's the non-fungible token. Non-fungible means you can't exchange it. You know, it's not like having a dollar that you can buy something with that dollar now that nobody knew who that dollar belonged to. With the NFTs, there's this blockchain behind it that identifies your ownership in an authenticated, unless you transfer it legally, you still continue to own it, and you can trace it back to your ownership of that piece of that artwork. And so right now they're selling pieces of electronic artwork, and it's very ephemeral, right? You know, what are you going to do with that artwork? Are you going to display it on your computer? Who are you going to show it to? There's no physical presence to it. But it's going to, you know, it's kind of experimental right now. And so it looks very hokey, and it looks like it doesn't have substance, and it doesn't yet. But that structure will expand to other things that will be monetized that way, where people will take, for example, you're very concerned about making sure that the food you eat, you know, that you have farm to table. And you're very concerned that the food that you eat is authentically a natural food, right? So you might take a part ownership with an NFT of a cow that's being raised in a farm. And you know the cow, and that cow is registered and has blockchain, so it's authenticated as that cow. As the cow grows and it gets ready to be shipped to market, it's your cow. You have part ownership of that cow. So do others. And eventually you could actually tell when they finally cut it up into steak at an abattoir, right? They will trace every piece of that cow, all the steaks, through that blockchain, and you have a part ownership through an NFT of that cow, and you could go to a restaurant, order your cow to be served to you, right? And you know it was the cow that you were tracking being raised at a ranch in Montana, right? The whole thing.
So Andres, you're saying that this too is part of the metaverse.
Correct. Correct. It has many aspects to it.
All right, so we have 2 minutes remaining. 2 minutes. Something you want to touch real quick?
Well, you know, it's going to the sky's the limit in a way, and we have to be very careful that you know, it doesn't get away from us. Yes, that it is used for benign purposes, and it doesn't get into dark areas, which we've seen that happen to the internet. It is going to happen, you know, as there is a dark web, there will be a dark metaverse, but it is our responsibility, the folks who have, you know, the keepers of our civilization, to make sure that it is used for good. It is used for a beneficial, and if it's to educate our children, that is done right, that it's done appropriately, and it protects them, but it is done so that it assists them to move forward their lives much better than we've done before, right? So it's going to be different, it's going to be new, but it's our job as educators to make sure that it doesn't get misused and it is appropriately applied. Well,
sir, there's more to cover here than we have time.
Oh yeah,
you've covered enough. You've covered a lot already. So if we could boil it down to a single takeaway, what would it be?
Well, you know, a great science fiction writer said that the future is already here, but it's not evenly distributed. In other words, you can see little bits of it here and there already occurring, right? So it's not everywhere else. The internet, well, it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. Social networks everywhere. The metaverse is just in little pieces. So if you want to get involved with it and see what it can do, pick one area, right? Something, and there's lots of areas of the metaverse that could be possibly useful for enhancing your educational activities, you as a teacher, and then investigate that. Find out how could it be used for good. Try to innovate with it. Try to see how it could be best applied to help your students, right? And be that part of the future that is happening.
Okay. And if people want to get in touch with you, because we've breezed through some of these things, and you're an author, you have 8 books underway, and you've
absolutely
given all kinds of training, and you've written articles. If people want to know more, how do they contact you?
Well, the easiest way is I'm on LinkedIn. That's easy to say. That's the only social network I use right now in a serious way, because professional, that works. So LinkedIn, find me, Andres Fortino. And I have an email address at NYU. So through my email address at NYU, AGF249 at NYU.edu, AGF249. Send me an email, and I'm happy to start a conversation and explore with you how this may be used for good, how may be used for benefit of our children, our students.
Well, thank you very, very much for being our guest tonight. There's a lot more to say, and perhaps we'll come back and pick up those bullets that we missed, that we dropped along the way. But Andres Fortino, PhD, is a well-known educator, education executive and leader, and educator, and a trainer. You're also a thought leader. That's most important here. I'm David Johnson, Transform Ed Consulting. And again, my kudos and thanks to Cassandra Williams, who is the brains behind Educational Innovations 360 Degrees. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you,
night.
David.
See you next time. Okay, I think we're off the air. Are you still there?
No cursing, right?
I think we're off the air.
How do we do, Dave?
Woo! See, I told you it goes very, very quickly.
Very fast. Yeah. Very fast.